2, 1.
All right, welcome to On the Box. I am Mark Spence, the Dean of the School of Biblical Evangelism here at Living Waters. And I got a special guest with us today. His name is Rob Douglas. And before I get into that and who he is and why he will interest you, I want to read you a quote that is inside the Evidence Bible. It's from Leonard Ravenhill. Now, Ray was friends with Leonard Ravenhill before he died. In fact, Ray believes he received the last letter that Leonard Ravenhill ever wrote. But let me read you a quote out of the Evidence Bible from Leonard Ravenhill. He says these words: "Prayer is the language of the poor. The self-sufficient don't need to pray. The self-satisfied don't want to pray. And the self-righteous can't pray. The only ones who can pray are those who realize that we need a power outside of ourselves." So if you find yourself not praying, it could very well be that you are self-righteous and not realizing it. I remember Ray once telling me when I was out evangelizing and witnessing, he said, "Mark, are you nervous?" And I said, "Yeah, a lot." And he goes, "That's good, because a nervous man is a praying man. And when you're not nervous, you become self-reliant and you don't need any help because you can do it all in and of yourself." So we do have a special guest with us today. His name is Rob Douglas. I've known Rob for quite a while, since January 1994. We were bakers together at Bible college. I actually met him at Bible college, and we were pulling all-nighters trying to make we called it, I think, a God's granola.
Right. Yeah.
Muffins and cookies and stuff for the student body. But one thing I realized that you were absolutely unique about, that I wanted to get to know, and that was you are MacGyver through and through. Okay. You had a bunk bed that you had tricked out with a coffee maker. Right. You had a bookshelf all made inside there. I don't remember all that you had. I just remember you had this, you had a blanket that came down, if I remember correctly, if you were like everybody else. But it was crazy the way you had situated your bed. And being a MacGyver was very important, because some years later we were in India. Yeah. I went to India with this guy. Right. And he hot-wired a car when we were in India. And we were there with Gospel for Asia, with Danny and KP
Danny
Yohannan. And one of the guys actually said, what did he say?
He said that the talk around the Gospel for Asia office is it's good when you bring a Calvary Chapel pastor, because he's probably a former car thief, and so he can hotwire your van when it breaks down on a short-term trip.
Well, there's Rob Douglas for you. I have known him for quite a while. He's an amazing guy. We did go to Bible college, but you're also tightly connected with Easy.
Right.
We were all pastors together at a church in Yorba Linda, and you ended up going out onto the mission field in northern Uganda, and you had Easy and Rachel live in your house.
Live in our house,
for 4 years.
Right.
Here's Rob Douglas for you. He's amazing. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do. Why is it so important for us to tune into what you do? Because it seems to me that we have a hard time reaching out to our neighbors. Okay. And if we do reach out to somebody, it's only going to be our neighbors. Right. It might be a sales clerk or somebody at the store, but you do something a little bit more than that, don't you? So tell us about you and what you do exactly.
I would say we were all saved, at a young age. Yeah. We went to Bible college. We learned about the Word. We went through the book of Acts. And as we were doing that, we realized that God was calling us in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And what was very interesting for me is to watch some of our pastors stayed right there at that church. Other ones like you and Easy went on to Living Waters, and you're going out into Jerusalem and Judea. And the Lord called myself, my wife, and a couple other pastors from the church to go to what we call the ends of the earth, an area that we would consider to be the 1040 window, an area of the world where most of the people have never heard the name of Jesus even one time.
Now, why would you want to do that, honestly? You're leaving the comfort of, yuppie Orange County. It's not a comfortable place to be. I mean, you actually got malaria when you were out inside after. Why would anybody really want to do it? Is that something you want to do? No. Is it a calling? Yes. Is it you felt nobody's doing it, I want to step up to the plate? Right. What is it?
It's we would go out with you and with Easy and with everybody, and as we're evangelizing our neighborhood, seeing the great need of it, God started to stir my heart for those people that have never heard even one time. And so when we were in India, I can remember you and I and the rest of the team, we were standing on a balcony looking at this street that was just covered with people and animals and cows and burning trash. And as we looked into those people's eyes, we realized they've never heard the gospel. They're completely lost. Right. And there was this deep hole, the shallowness in their look. And they were honoring a cow. I can remember one family came out with a gift of rice and flowers, and they were honoring a cow in the middle of the street next to the pile of burning trash. And at that moment, the Lord said, they've never heard the gospel. You need to begin to pray about these things. Wow. And that's what started it in us, was that first trip to India. And then about 2 years later, the Lord brought it to North Africa.
You know, so many things that we almost think are commonsensical. You know, I remember listening to you a few years ago, and you were talking about common sense as you began to speak. And you had overheard somebody say, hey, listen, when a spear is thrown, if you flex your muscles, the spear can't harm you. It won't be able to penetrate your skin if you're flexing your muscles. Now we look at that. Is this guy off his rocker? I mean, this is common sense. You know, but there's a lot of voodoo that's a part of the different places where you go. Witchcraft. And I remember you saying one time, if you go up to an individual and say, "Do you know Jesus Christ?" They would say, "No, he's probably in the next village." They have no idea. I mean, they really have no idea about Christianity, do they?
I have no idea.
That is absolutely crazy. So you're part of a ministry. What is the name of your ministry?
Ends of the Earth, coming from Acts chapter 1, verse 8.
Ends of the Earth. I think we have a lower third. Well, we'll put that up in just a couple minutes. And you are in the midst of raising up nationals. What is a national, and why do you want to raise him up?
Well, a national missionary is one that speaks a language. In Africa, there are literally almost 1,000 unique languages, 1,000 unique cultures and people groups. It's very different than America. You and I can go to New York or San Francisco or Florida, and we speak English. It might be a little different, but we all speak the same language. In these parts of Africa, in these parts of the world, each county or each state would be totally unique in its language and its culture. And so you and I can pour into a group of 10 nationals that speak 10 unique languages, that know 10 unique cultures, and we can reproduce ourselves by the tens, and by the hundreds, and hopefully in years, by the thousands. So it's not just me trying to do it and learn a language and take 20 years and stumbling around. I pour into men from the Word. They see it, and then they take the gospel as far as they can go.
Well, you know, here's my American mindset. My American mindset is I'm smarter. You know, I've got the money, the resources to be able to do it. Let me go into these places and do all the work myself, because these poor folk will never get a clue to be able to do it themselves. And that's not the case.
No, not at all. That's our first impression because, we have education, we have finances, we have our society, we have churches on every corner, and so we feel like we're more equipped. We get there and we realize we're like little children stumbling around. Regardless of the money or the education, people with the greatest degrees come to these countries, they don't have a clue where to start. And so for us, we had to learn that the hard way. We were warned, but we didn't understand it. And how it worked for us is we moved into this refugee camp. God had called us and led us into this situation where we knew where we were supposed to be, living amongst Sudanese refugees that had gone through 20 years of civil war. A million people have been murdered. Families have been scattered all throughout this part of Africa. So as we're living amongst these people in this little grass hut, it was the cutest little thing you could imagine. But we went from the Orange County, nice normal home, into this grass hut. And as we're living there, we're trying to figure out, we're literally having prayer meetings and talking and saying, how are we going to penetrate these people? Because we don't speak their languages. Very few of them speak English. And they speak 6 or 7 other languages amongst themselves. How are we, as these foreigners, we could have been from outer space, or we could have been from America. It was the same thing. How are we going to reach these people and minister to them? And so we just began to do what Christians do. Love each other and pray and study the Word and just do what God wants us to do. And as we were doing that, within a few months, a woman came to my wife. She was a Muslim lady. Her name was Vicky. That was her kind of an English name. She came to my wife and she said, Heidi, I've been watching you. And you guys have something that we've never seen before. And now my wife is kind of astonished. She said, what do we have? And she said, you have love that we've never experienced. And my wife said, how are we loving each other? We're not doing anything spectacular or new. And she said, I watch your men serve the women. And in this culture, men don't serve the women. Women do all the work, and men are there to be served, never to serve. And we've watched your husbands do whatever it takes to make your lives comfortable, like taking the clothes off the laundry line because there's no washer and dryer, no running water, no electricity, none of that stuff. We would just take the clothes off the laundry line so that the rain wouldn't get them dirty after they've just been hand washed, which takes a long time. And as we were doing that, she came and she said, Heidi, I want to know what you have to say. And so it was love. And we see this in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. Jesus says, love each other as I have loved you. And by this love, all men will know that you are my disciples. And so it wasn't our education. It wasn't, our wealth. It wasn't all of the things that we thought it would be. It was simply being Christ-like. And so that one situation turned into a discipleship between my wife and Vicky. The next week, Vicky brings 2 more people, and then 6 more people, and then 10 more people. And by the time this has gone on for a few weeks, there's 25 people there. 2 of them are ex-witch doctors. Vicky convert. Yeah, these witch doctors convert from worshiping demons and sacrificing chickens and dancing all night to demons to Christianity.
I mean, straight stuff that you would see on television. Stuff that this is legitimate.
Absolutely. And we had no idea it was even happening because it was all in the culture. So we're just loving each other. We're teaching the word, and people are coming out of the woodwork saying, "There's something about you that we've never seen." Muslims are coming to Christianity. Witch doctors are converting, and now this women's Bible study is growing. And the gospel's going forth simply because we went and we loved each other.
So how do people develop a heart to reach really these unlovable people? They're not like me. It's an uncomfortable situation. So I can't talk about politics and sports when I'm around them. I mean, you can only go so far. You come over for tea and you're sitting there for the next 8 hours with them. How did you develop a heart for these unreached people group? How did you do that?
So it started with that trip to India. And then we met Wes Bentley from Far Reaching Ministries. And he showed us pictures about Sudan and the people in Sudan. And as we looked at these people, at that time those people were starving in those photos, we looked at these people and we said, what would I do physically and spiritually for my family, for my neighbor, if I saw them do that? And it was simply the love of God in our hearts for him, to bring him honor on this earth. And these people are in need. In a sense, we were like the man walking down the road and seeing the man beaten. Were we going to be like the priest and the Levite and go around that man that was just fallen among thieves? Or are we truly going to have the love of God in us, bring him up, take him on, wash him, put him on our donkey, take him to the hotel, and provide for him? And so it was the love of God in us that simply said, what will you do for your fellow man?
Well, that is rather quite amazing. I remember when we were in India over there in Bombay or Mumbai, you would see kids cuddled up to goats. Just something you wouldn't see here, even up to the nip, trying to get some nourishment. Give me something that I don't have. I'd like to have a heart that does that, for sure. But how did you know that God was calling you to go overseas? Because we always want to say, here am I, send him. My calling is here. I will serve as a sender. And we need people to serve as senders.
Absolutely.
But how do you know that it's your calling to actually go out? I was seeing somebody in the chat room was saying, hey, do you have any advice on somebody going on a short-term mission trip to Africa? Apparently somebody's going to be going there. Maybe you could address that in a little bit. But how did you realize, hey, this is my calling. I need to go out there?
Well, it started for me in John chapter 4, when Jesus was dealing with the woman at the well. We all know it's one of the greatest evangelistic episodes we see in the New Testament. Jesus is there. He's sitting with a woman that nobody wants to be with. His culture says don't do that. You don't even go to Samaria. That's a new place. Don't even talk to those people. They're not worth spending your time with. And so as I'm reading through this, I find myself, and I think that as Americans, we're all like the disciples, where we're worried about, Jesus, have you had lunch? And what's going to happen next? And Jesus says, my food is to do the will of my Father and to finish his work. And then he said, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are white and ready for harvest. And as I looked at the 1040 window, as I looked at an area that spread across North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, and I looked at over 2 billion people within that 1040 window, 10 degrees above the equator to 40 degrees above the equator, Africa, Asia. And I looked at 2 billion people, and I said, Lord, 2 billion people. We're not talking about a million. We're talking about 999 million times 2. It's massive. It's 7 times the size of our country that have never heard the gospel. And the Lord said, lift up your eyes, Robin, look at the fields. They're white and ready for harvest, but I use people. Just speak the word.
Right.
Go there and do it. And so then when I come to Matthew chapter 28, it doesn't say most of you stay and one of you go. It says go.
Yeah, right.
And so I thought, okay, Lord, I see the need. I see this. And in prayer, of course, the Lord spoke to me personally. This is the area. This is the place I believe you have to have a definite call. You can't just go to any place. It doesn't work that way. But the commandment was go. Go and lift up your eyes. Go and be eternally minded. And it was our trip to India that just sparked all that in us.
Wow.
And it took a few years. And then the Lord started to bring it. He honed it in. He focused it.
I remember Jim Elliott once said, why do you need a voice when you have a verse? And the verse is to go. And we come across people that say, hey, I'm willing to go, but in the meantime, I'm going to stay. No, we need to go, but be willing to stay.
Exactly.
You know, and we tend to have it the exact opposite. You know, I remember John Piper once saying, hey, but what if God calls my children out to the mission field, and what if they die? And his response was, then they die for the glory of God. They die knowing that Christ is the prize that is set before them, and this is why they go. Wow, I mean, that's not what's heard today.
K.P. Yohannan put it very clearly when he was teaching, and he said, stamp eternity across your eyes. And every time you look at something in this life, you say, for the moment that I have to live on this earth, which is but a vapor, just a moment, is it lived for eternity? So if it's evangelizing what we call across the street, what way the Master's doing in these areas, or if it's across the globe, eternally minded is what we need to do. I don't know any other way to live. We are here for a purpose, and that's to glorify God. And if people are dying without ever hearing the message of the gospel, and if they have to hear to believe, and if they have to believe to be saved, we need to go.
But here we are. I think we have a picture. I don't know if we set it up yet. A picture of you in Uganda amongst the different people that are there, the Sudanese refugees. If we have that, there you are. And there's you're the one on the left. Who's that pretty woman on the right?
That's my beautiful wife.
That's
Heidi.
Your beautiful bride. Look at that. Now, do you ever go to these areas where they've never even seen white skin?
Yes, absolutely.
What do? They just trip out and they're just staring at you.
The first thing they do is they stare at you like you're from Mars. That's why
they want to touch your leg.
And the other thing they do is they touch they touch the hair on your arms, because the Africans don't have hair on their arms.
Oh, right.
We find the kids just constantly petting us, and so the joke is we're like goats, and they're petting us because we're so hairy. So yeah, absolutely. I've had people where I arrive in a vehicle, that we have to get to these remote places, and they don't know how to open the door. They've never been in a car before.
Oh, wow.
They don't know anything about how any of that life works. These people that we go to, the ends of the earth, are living in the Stone Age. Literally, without people like the British and stuff years ago bringing the bicycles and clothing, they would still be living with rocks and sticks and mud huts. Total Stone Age.
Well, so I can imagine you're going out into the 1040 window. It's not the Mall of America.
No, it's not.
You can't just run down a Radio Shack. And I know you're a bit of a techie guy wanting to put stuff together. At what point do you realize, I really think, because there's got to be a step of faith, where you're stepping out and you're going, I think God is calling me there. I'm pretty, but you really have to have a sense of faith to step out of your comfort zone, where God has to almost give you a sense of first fruits, if you would. I really see that God is a part of this. This is why I'm out here. This is what I'm doing. Do you have any examples of maybe a first fruit where you can say, I saw God's hand on my life when I was out there?
Well, it started with my wife in the Bible study and just loving each other. And I, being more of a builder, we were living in that mud hut. It wasn't going to be big enough to support all the things that we did in the ministry. So as I'm building and working with the national people, that's where my connection came to them. But when we wanted to build a house, we had to dig mud up from the ground, mold it into a mud brick, and then we had to go to the river and get sand and go to 200 miles away to the city to get a cement bag, bring it all back. And when we needed wood for the roof, we had to cut down trees. And we were literally building our lives out of the mud. In that, the Lord started to bring a fellowship between me and the men. And they said, wow, you're not just some rich Westerner, rich white person. You're willing to get dirty with us. You're willing to be in the trenches.
So you don't bring your food from the U.S. out here to where you go, now I'm going to eat my stuff. You eat the way you guys want to eat. You dress the way you normally would in America.
For the first week, you do that. And then you realize this isn't going anywhere.
It ain't going to go anywhere.
So you learn to eat with your hands. And every time I stick my hands into a bowl of rice or beans, I feel like my mom's going to slap me on the back of the head. Son, I taught you not to do that. But that's what you have to do. You have to become like them. And Paul taught us that in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. I have become all things to all men. And that means the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we think, because for them to relate to me, I can't be what they call Mzungu, white man.
White man.
I can't be a Mzungu. I have to be a Sudanese.
Well, I remember when we were in India, looking over it, and they're preparing our food in the dirt.
In the dirt. Right.
And then they serve it to us. And you know that there's dirt and rocks. So you learn not to bite down all the way.
Right.
You know, and you end up maybe spitting out some bigger pieces, but then you just swallow it.
And sometimes they're cooking that food with cow dung. Cow dung is their fuel. So you're watching them manipulate the cow dung to put it in there to cook the food, and then they're working with the food. They've never washed their hands. There's no running water. And you just say, if God calls me to follow, God calls me to swallow. That's what it is.
That's great. What would you say is one of the, maybe a couple of the greatest trials that you experience when you're out there? You got no in and out, right? There's no... I would imagine, I remember when I was at Bible college and I wasn't on the meal plan, I went through an involuntary fast. Fasting involuntarily is not fun. When you want to eat and you can't eat, it's miserable. Just straight misery for Mark Spence, because I like to eat. Some people live to eat, others eat to live. And when you're on the mission field, you're eating to live. You're eating to survive. So what is a trial? A typical trial, even perhaps.
Yeah, well, there was many trials. First, there's malaria. You know, I've had it. I'm going to guess about 10 times. 2 times almost died from it because I was in England and in America when it really flared up in my body, and we don't treat it well in England and America.
Oh, right.
But when we're in Africa, the 8 other times we treat it and we're okay. And so there was just daily stuff. There was poisonous snakes. We had green mambas, black mambas, cobras, puff adders, and there was a season where we were building our house and we were digging up in the ground, and all the snakes live in holes. And we killed a snake a week. We're talking about 6-7 foot huge cobras. We killed them 1 per week. It came to the point where my grandma said, what can I give you that can make me feel more safe that my grandkids are on the field? And I said, oh, there's these snake tools, like a fire extinguisher in America. We had snake tools on all of our walls. So if we saw the snake, we had this metal device that we could grab it and pin it down and then kill it without it getting to us. So there was many trials. But I think the one that really stands out is we went to Africa with just a young married couple, a couple other Americans, no children in the family, and my wife became pregnant. And the calling has to be reconsidered at that time. I'm living in a Stone Age environment, malaria, snakes. We had Ebola. Ebola is a disease where when you touch somebody with Ebola, you contract it and your organs begin to liquefy within 72 hours. We had that go through the community. And so and it was just every month it was another major trauma. And so we said, can we bring our child back here?
So it's one thing to put your life on the line.
At risk.
And then you go, I have little wee ones.
Now I have this little, beautiful 6-week-old baby. Can I put her at the end? The Lord's calling didn't change one bit.
Wow.
So as we entered into the refugee camp with our 6-week-old, because we didn't give birth there because there's no facilities if there's any problems. We gave birth here in California, took our 6-week-old back. As we were coming down the road with our baby, the ladies from the Bible study came running out to the car, screaming and doing this whole African dance. I won't even try to redo it. And they're doing this whole thing, and they said, you have brought us our baby. And they said, she might be white, and they're holding her up. She might be white, but she's one of ours.
Wow.
Now we know that you truly love us.
Wow.
And so it was when we, in a sense, put our lives at risk and our families at risk that people said, our hearts are wide open because you have proven to us by your actions that you love us. Tell us. And so we gave our child an American name, Hannah, and then we gave her a Sudanese name, Amio. Amio in the local language means the gift of God.
Wow.
So they said she may be white, but she's ours.
Wow. So on that token, well, how have the nationals been affected as you've gone out to try to minister to them, to teach them?
Right. Well, there was one other story, and I'll do it briefly. There was a night where everything seemed to be fine when we went to sleep. We woke up at about 1 in the morning to machine gun fire right outside of our house.
Right outside your house?
Right outside of our house. We've heard of Joseph Kony and the LRA rebels. Well, we lived in that area. And that night, 4 rebels attacked our house, attacked our place. We had bullet holes all out in the outside walls. It was the worst moment of my life. My teeth were chattering so bad, I couldn't even think. I couldn't do anything. I had a child, I had a wife, I had other missionaries. There was guns everywhere. People were bleeding. It was a horrible situation. Long story short, the Lord delivered the Americans, but 2 of the Africans were shot. One of them was wounded in his leg and in his arm. We went to pick up his body. His foot stayed on the ground while his leg stretched because all of its bones had been blown out of his lower leg. And another man was shot through the lower legs, and it blew out his arteries, and he died in my vehicle on the way to the hospital. And so we got to the hospital. We're in shock. There's now a dead man in the vehicle. I had to unload his body cold. I can't even explain to you the trauma. I bring it up to say that when we went back to the refugee camp a couple weeks after all this had settled down, they said, now we know you loved us when you brought your child, but now we're brothers. We have been shot at. We have had people attacked. We've lost family members. But now that you're willing to risk your life with us, tell us everything you want to tell us. Now we're one in Christ. Now we are brothers. And so the Nationals took that, and they're taking it to a whole new level. So as they graduated from the Bible college that my partner and I had for 2 years, we took them from Genesis to Revelation. As the Nationals graduated from the Bible college, they came to us and said, now that you've taught us throughout all of the Bible, but especially the book of Acts, that God uses foolish people like Peter. God uses foolish people like you, Rob. You're that foolish white guy that just showed up in faith and you did it. I know God wants to use us. Can you, Rob, help us not relocate to America and find a better life? Can you help us go deeper into Sudan, into areas where people have never heard the gospel before? And can you get us into those areas and train us even further? That's what we want to do.
So where do we go from here? I mean, you have people that don't want to reach out to even their next door neighbors, let alone people across the street.
Right.
You know, I saw a quote in one place where it says 2% of all money given to the mission field actually makes it to the mission field. So if people wanted to donate to your ministry, what do they do, and how much of that actually goes out to the mission field?
Well, it's interesting. We have a policy where we give 100% of all monies donated for the mission field to the mission field.
100%.
So my wife and I raise separate money from family and friends so that we can have our own support. But if you give money today on our website, 100% of that will go to national missionaries, to children that are hurting, that are hearing the gospel for the first time, or to the medical clinic that we have that's targeting our 1 million that we're working with right now in South Sudan.
That's insane. Well, you're going to hear a lot more from Rob tomorrow because he's going to be our guest tomorrow. And you don't want to miss it as we get a little bit more practical, even more so than we did today, and apply this to your lives. So until next time, be strengthened, encouraged, and unafraid. Go share the gospel.
For questions about On the Box with Ray Comfort or to submit questions for future shows, please email